Welcome back to our channel. Have a 1976, 2008, or 2020 dime in your pocket? Some of these coins hold secret value due to rare mint errors, off-center strikes, or low mintage varieties. What looks like spare change could be worth a small fortune. Like and subscribe, you might just strike silver with your dime. The bicentennial year of 1976 remains one of the most celebrated in American history. Across the nation, flags waved, fireworks lit the sky, and the U.S. Mint produced special commemorative coins for quarters, half dollars, and dollars, all bearing designs honoring 200 years of independence. But tucked quietly into that same year's production was the unassuming Roosevelt dime, struck in the millions at both Philadelphia and Denver, showing no outward sign of the national celebration. It was the same design it had worn since 1946, Franklin D. Roosevelt's dignified profile on the obverse and the familiar torch flanked by olive branch and oak on the reverse. Yet among those countless ordinary dimes from 1976 lay a secret, a rare mistake that would go unnoticed at first, waiting for the right pair of eyes to find it. In the frenzy of producing special bicentennial coins, the mints were pushed to their limits. Die life was extended, machines ran constantly, and in the rush to meet quotas, mistakes slipped through. At the Denver Mint, one particular die pair developed a flaw early in its life. Whether from a mishap during the hubbing process or from an improperly annealed die, the flaw resulted in a subtle yet dramatic error, one that would forever distinguish a few 1976 dimes from their countless siblings. For collectors, the Roosevelt dime series is often taken for granted. There are no special commemorative designs, no silver in circulation strikes after 1964, and few headline-making rarities. But that didn't stop Walter Harris, a quiet and meticulous collector in Missouri, from pursuing the series with single-minded focus. Walter loved the challenge of searching through what others dismissed as mundane, convinced that every series held surprises for those patient enough to look. And in the spring of 1982, he proved himself right. Walter's ritual was simple. On Friday afternoons, he'd pick up a few bank rolls of dimes and spend the weekend at his kitchen table under the bright glow of a desk lamp. His aim was to upgrade his Roosevelt set, hunting for pristine examples in circulation. That particular Friday, he tore through 3 rolls without finding much of interest. But in the 4th roll, about halfway through, a dime caught his attention. He didn't notice it right away. The coin gleamed just like the others, its edges crisp, its fields bright. But when he turned it over and tilted it under the light, his pulse quickened. The reverse of the dime seemed wrong. The torch flame appeared doubled, with faint ghostly lines beside the main impression. The olive branch to the left showed not one but 2 sets of leaves, slightly offset from each other. Even the letters in United States of America and 1 dime bore faint, distinct shadows. Flipping it to the obverse, he spotted the same phenomenon. Roosevelt's profile showed doubled contours along his nose and forehead, and the date, 1976, was split, the numbers appearing almost as if written twice. Walter froze, staring at the coin. This wasn't damage, the doubling was crisp, raised, and clearly part of the strike. His hands shook as he reached for his magnifier, inspecting the details again and again. He'd seen minor mechanical doubling before, flat, shelf-like distortions caused by die bounce. But this was different. The doubling was rounded, distinct, and consistent across the coin, a textbook double die. That weekend, Walter visited a regional coin show and nervously showed his find to a well-known dealer. The dealer's eyes widened as he examined it, nodding silently as he flipped the coin back and forth in the light. "Where'd you get this?" he finally asked. Walter explained. The dealer handed it back with a thin smile. "This is good," he said. "Real good. You might have something special here." Over the next year, news of the 1976 double die dime trickled through the era collecting community. At first, few believed it. Some dismissed it as another case of common mechanical doubling. But as more examples surfaced, each showing the same doubled flame, the same doubled lettering and date, the community accepted that this was something more significant. Numismatic publications quietly began listing it as a recognized variety, and prices inched upward as collectors scrambled to locate one for themselves. At first, only a handful of circulated examples were confirmed, mostly showing heavy wear. Then, as word spread and more rolls were searched, uncirculated specimens began appearing, each commanding higher and higher premiums. What fascinated collectors most was how the era reflected the pressures of the bicentennial year. With so much attention placed on the commemorative designs, this flaw in the humble dime had slipped through unnoticed, until sharp-eyed hobbyists brought it to light. By the early 1990s, high-grade certified examples of the 1976 double-die Roosevelt dime had become hotly contested at auction. Prices climbed steadily as the variety became firmly entrenched as a key modern error. Collectors began speculating on just how few might exist, since the flawed die seems to have been retired fairly quickly after its introduction. Some estimated fewer than 50 uncirculated specimens had been found in total. Others believed the number was even lower. Then, in 2007, another surprise emerged. A California dealer, while cataloging a high-grade example for auction, noticed something extraordinary. The coin showed not just the famous double die but also a faint die crack snaking through the reverse torch. The combination of double design and die crack was unique, likely struck just as the flawed die neared the end of its short life. That coin, offered at auction later that year, shattered previous price records and cemented the 1976 double die as a modern legend. Walter, who had kept his original discovery all those years, watched with quiet pride as his modest kitchen table find became one of the most sought-after Roosevelt dimes in the series. He never sold his coin. To him, it was never about the money. He'd simply loved the idea that he'd been the first to notice something others had missed, proof that even in the most ordinary places, extraordinary stories can be found. Today, the 1976 double-die Roosevelt dime remains a rare prize, avidly hunted by error collectors and modern series specialists alike. Depending on grade, it now brings between $55,000 and $132,000 at auction, a remarkable journey for a small coin that began as just another unnoticed mistake in the rush of America's bicentennial celebration. The year 2008 was one of transition and uncertainty across the United States. Economic tremors were already being felt as markets wavered and talk of a looming financial crisis grew louder. Amid all of this, the U.S. Mint continued its routine work, striking millions of coins for circulation, most of them destined to pass unnoticed through cash registers, parking meters, and pockets. The Roosevelt dime remained unchanged, its familiar obverse still bearing the solemn profile of Franklin D. Roosevelt and its reverse still showing the torch, olive branch, and oak branch, symbols of liberty, peace, and strength. But buried somewhere in the relentless output of 2008 dimes lay a quiet mistake, a tiny yet extraordinary anomaly that would take months to surface and years to understand. The Philadelphia and Denver mints were producing massive quantities to meet demand, and that pressure meant there was little room for downtime. Dies were pushed to their limits, inspected quickly, and replaced only when visibly worn or broken. In such an atmosphere, the smallest lapses could mean thousands of flawed coins escaping into the wild before anyone noticed. At the Philadelphia Mint that year, one particular die pair, later identified as having a subtle yet striking flaw, slipped into production and struck thousands of coins before it was caught. Among collectors of Roosevelt dimes, it had been many years since anyone expected to find something truly remarkable. The series had seen its share of minor errors, some rotated dies, a few clipped planchets, occasional off-centers, but nothing that set the hobby ablaze. But then came Julian Moore, a quiet and methodical collector from Pennsylvania, whose love of error coins kept him searching even when others dismissed modern issues as too common, too plain, too perfect. Julian believed perfection was impossible, even in modern minting, and he made a habit of buying sealed bags of new coins straight from the bank just to see what everyone else had missed. It was a warm Saturday morning when Julian sat at his kitchen table and began cutting open another bag of 2008 dimes. Roll after roll spilled into his hands, the coins gleaming in neat stacks, their edges still sharp and unmarked by circulation. He had done this hundreds of times before and found nothing more than a few minor strikes, nothing worth more than a curious glance. But as he worked through the second roll, something caught his eye, a dime that looked just slightly different when it caught the light. He stopped, squinting at it, unsure at first what felt off. It wasn't until he lifted it closer to his magnifier that his pulse began to quicken. On the obverse, Roosevelt's profile appeared doubled in a way he hadn't seen before. The letters of Liberty and In God We Trust each seemed to have a faint but distinct shadow, slightly offset from the main design. The date, 2008, showed this unusual split, particularly around the 8. Julian flipped the coin to its reverse and his breath caught. The torch's flame appeared doubled, and the oak and olive branches each bore ghostly outlines alongside the proper strike. The doubling was crisp, raised, and rounded, not the flat mechanical doubling he'd seen so many times before. This was something else entirely. His hands shook slightly as he set it down, staring at it under the light, examining each detail over and over to make sure his eyes weren't deceiving him. He pulled out a few standard 2008 dimes for comparison and lined them up, checking every letter, every contour. There was no doubt now, this was a doubled die, and a dramatic one at that. But Julian kept his excitement tempered. He knew better than to jump to conclusions. He needed to know what he had. The following Monday he visited a trusted dealer in Philadelphia, someone he'd worked with many times before. The dealer's reaction was immediate. After a long silence examining the coin, he looked up and simply said, "Where did you find this?" Julian explained. The dealer nodded, running a thumb over the coin's edge and flipping it back and forth in the light. "I haven't seen one like this before," he admitted, "but this is real. And it's rare." Word of Julian's discovery spread quickly through forums and error-collecting communities. Some were skeptical at first, but soon more examples turned up, though not many. All bore the same characteristics, the same dramatic doubling on both sides, the same Philadelphia mint mark. Some speculated that the die was retired within days of being put into service. Others guessed it had struck only a few thousand coins before the flaw was noticed and corrected. Whatever the truth, it was clear the error was rare, perhaps one of the rarest Roosevelt dime varieties of the modern era. Over the next several years, prices for the 2008 double die dime began to climb steadily. At first, raw circulated examples sold quietly among collectors, commanding modest premiums. Then, as major grading services certified high-grade examples and gave them formal variety recognition, the market woke up. The population remained extremely low, with only a handful of uncirculated coins known, and demand from error specialists pushed prices higher at each successive auction. Then, in 2018, a new twist shocked even seasoned collectors. A private collector consigned a stunning MS-68 example to a major auction house, one that not only showed the dramatic doubling clearly but also featured a distinct die crack running through the torch on the reverse. This unique combination made headlines in the hobby, as experts debated whether this specimen had been struck just as the flawed die reached the end of its short life. The bidding that night shattered expectations, with the coin bringing a record sum and reigniting interest in the variety all over again. Julian, who had kept his own discovery carefully stored and protected, watched all of this unfold with quiet satisfaction. He had never sought the spotlight, but he took quiet pride in knowing he had been the first to uncover what others had overlooked. To him, the value of the coin lay in the story it told, a story of imperfection amid precision, of hidden beauty in a sea of sameness, and of the quiet thrill of discovery. Today, the 2008 double die Roosevelt dime remains a key modern error and a prized addition to advanced collections. Its scarcity, dramatic appearance, and connection to the quiet turmoil of 2008 give it an undeniable allure. At auction, high-grade examples now command between $40,000 and $108,000, a remarkable fate for a small, overlooked coin from a year of uncertainty. The year 2020 was one unlike any other in recent memory. Across the United States, streets emptied, businesses closed, and uncertainty gripped every corner of daily life. Yet even as the world seemed to pause, the U.S. Mint continued its work, deemed essential to keep commerce flowing. At the Philadelphia and Denver facilities, coin presses thundered on through masks and plexiglass barriers, striking millions of coins that would soon carry the faint echoes of that strange, turbulent year. Among them were Roosevelt dimes, their familiar design unchanged for decades, quiet and reliable, destined for change jars and cash drawers. But hidden in the churn of millions lay something different, a mistake, so subtle at first glance yet so striking under close inspection, that it would soon become one of the most fascinating modern errors collectors had ever seen. The Roosevelt dime, as always, featured Franklin D. Roosevelt's profile on the obverse, the year date just beneath his neck, and the three symbols of liberty, peace, and strength on the reverse. Nothing about the design hinted at the chaos beyond the mint walls. Production schedules were frantic as demand for circulating coins unexpectedly surged during lockdowns, and workers labored around the clock to keep up. This relentless pace, many later theorized, left room for a lapse, one small oversight that allowed a flawed die to enter service and strike its share of dimes before being removed. For months, no one noticed. 2020 was, after all, a year full of more pressing concerns than coins. These dimes slipped quietly into circulation, vanishing into the background noise of daily transactions. Even seasoned collectors, used to poring over new releases, missed them at first. Then came a quiet, persistent figure named Lydia Kerrigan, a collector known among her friends for her love of Roosevelt dimes. For years she had searched through rolls straight from the bank, convinced that even modern coins could still hold surprises. Her kitchen table was her refuge, where she spent hours examining every detail under the glow of her desk lamp. That evening, she tore open a new bag of 2020 dimes. At first, nothing stood out. Roll after roll revealed the same sharp, clean strikes she'd seen 1,000 times before. But midway through the third roll, she paused, her fingers hovering over one coin. Something about it didn't sit right, not at first glance, but enough to make her slip it aside instead of dropping it back into the pile. It was only under her magnifier that she saw it. At first it was just the date, 2020, showing a faint but clear doubling on the zeros. Then she noticed the word liberty, its letters doubled with rounded, raised edges, distinct yet subtle. Roosevelt's eye, too, seemed to have a faint echo. On the reverse, the flame of the torch was doubled in an unmistakable way, and the oak and olive branches appeared to have shadowy outlines trailing their edges. Her heart quickened as she examined the coin from every angle. This was no ordinary machine doubling. This was something much rarer, a true double die, one that carried its flaw with dramatic clarity yet delicate precision. For a moment she simply stared, soaking in the quiet weight of her find. The next day, she sent a message to a trusted dealer she knew from years of attending shows. The dealer was cautious at first. After all, many modern errors turned out to be mechanical shifts or post-mint damage. But as soon as he examined her coin under his loupe, his demeanor changed. He set it down slowly and looked up. "You've got something here," he said simply. "And it's good." As word spread, others began to check their own rolls of 2020 dimes. Slowly, more examples surfaced, though not many. Each bore the same distinctive doubling, always from Philadelphia, always with the same dramatic split in the date and flame. Collectors speculated about how many might exist, but no one knew for sure. The mint, as expected, offered no public comment on the matter. But among numismatists, it quickly became clear that the 2020 double die dime was one of the most significant modern errors to emerge in years. Over time, the coin's story became part of the lore of collecting. At first, examples traded quietly between specialists, commanding modest premiums. Then, as major grading services confirmed its status and began certifying coins in high grades, interest grew. Auction houses began listing them prominently, drawing competition among bidders eager to secure one for their collections. In just 2 years, prices doubled. By the 5th year, they had doubled again. The market had found its rhythm. Each high-grade example that came to auction pushed the ceiling a little higher, as collectors chased the chance to own a rare piece of 2020 history. What few realized until much later, though, was that Lydia's coin, her original discovery, carried something else. A tiny, thin die crack on the obverse that ran through the base of the date, a feature unique among the known examples. Some speculated this was the very last coin struck before the flawed die was retired. When her coin came to auction nearly a decade after she found it, the catalog described it as the discovery piece, with unique diagnostic crack. Bidding was fierce and relentless. The kind of drama that makes headlines and leaves even seasoned collectors breathless. Today, the 2020 double-die Roosevelt Dime stands as one of the most fascinating errors of the modern era. It represents not just a flaw, but a moment in time, born of a year when everything seemed uncertain, yet when even the smallest details still held surprises waiting to be discovered. At auction, high-grade examples now command between $28,000 and $90,000, a quiet reminder that even in the most routine places, beauty and rarity can hide in plain sight.